My name's Tessa, I'm 27, and I work the front desk at a dental office in Phoenix. The kind of job where people yell at you over insurance and then act like nothing happened. I thought I could handle awkward family stuff the same way. Turns out I couldn't. Because the night I handed my mom our wedding invitation at my aunt's birthday dinner, she didn't even lower her voice. She held it up between two fingers like it smelled bad and said, "Oh wow, you're really doing this? You're really gonna embarrass yourself in public." The table went quiet in that way where forks stop moving but nobody wants to look at you. My aunt stared into her wine like it had the answers. My cousins suddenly got very interested in their phones. And my fiancé, Mason, was sitting beside me with his hand on my knee, not squeezing, just there, like he was waiting to see what I'd do. I nodded once and said, "It's in 2 months. I wanted you to have time." My mom laughed like I'd told a joke and said, "2 months notice for what? So we can plan how to explain it to people?" Tessa, honey, a backyard wedding with a guy who changes oil for a living isn't an event. It's a cry for help. Mason's jaw tightened, but he didn't say a word. I didn't either. I just reached across the table, took the invitation back from her fingers, and smoothed the corner she'd bent. In my head, something clicked into place, calm and cold, like a light switch. I didn't announce it. I didn't threaten anybody. I just decided that if they wanted to treat my life like a joke, then they were not going to be part of the punchline. Not the way they expected. The messed up part is, my family wasn't always this obvious about it. Growing up, I was the easy kid. My older sister Kendra was the star. Cheer captain, honor roll, everyone's favorite. I was the one who stayed out of trouble, got decent grades, helped my mom with groceries, and tried not to take up space. My dad left when I was 16, and after that, my mom got sharper, like the world had personally offended her. Kendra leaned into it. They became a team. I was more like extra baggage. Still, when I met Mason, I thought maybe things would soften. Mason is steady. The type of guy who shows up early, fixes stuff without being asked, and doesn't talk big. He works at a garage, yes, but he's also the guy who helped my neighbor replace her fence after a storm for free because she's 80 and stubborn. When I told my mom I was dating him, she smiled too wide and said, "Aw, that's cute. Like a little phase." When I told her we were engaged, she asked, "Is this because you're scared you'll end up alone?" Like marriage was something I was doing to myself, not a person choosing me. I gave them 2 months' notice because I honestly believed that was generous. I picked a Saturday afternoon ceremony at a small venue outside the city, not fancy, but clean and pretty, with string lights and desert trees and a simple arch we rented. Mason's parents offered to help pay for food. My best friend, Lacey, offered to do my hair. I found my dress on sale and didn't tell anyone because I didn't want opinions. I still texted my mom the details. I still invited Kendra to be a bridesmaid even though she didn't deserve it. I still tried to keep the peace. At first, my mom acted like she might come. She asked what time it started and whether there would be real drinks. Kendra left me on red for a week, then replied, "Not sure I can get off work," which was funny because Kendra doesn't work weekends. She sells houses and posts brunch photos like it's a full-time job. I didn't call her out. I just said, "Okay, let me know." A few days later, my mom called me while I was at work. I stepped into the supply closet, wedged between paper towels and floss boxes, and answered on the second ring. She didn't say hello. She said, "So what's the plan here, Tessa? Are you trying to force us to pretend this is normal?" I stared at the mop bucket and said, "I'm getting married, Mom." She sighed like I was exhausting and said, "Mason's family is, what, going to be there? That's going to reflect on us." I asked reflect how. She said, "You know exactly how. People talk. And I'm not sitting through some low-budget thing where your sister has to explain why she's even there." She said it so casually, like it was a scheduling problem. I didn't argue. I just said, "You don't have to explain anything." She snapped back, "That's not the point." Then she hung up. I went back out to the front desk, smiled at a patient, and scheduled a cleaning like my heart wasn't doing that weird slow thud. Mason noticed when I got home. He asked, "What did she say?" I shrugged and said, "Same stuff." He nodded and said, "Okay." That was it. No dramatic speeches, just okay. But the next week, the little things started piling up. Kendra finally called me, and her voice had that fake sweet tone she uses when she's about to be mean. She said, "So, just checking, you're not expecting me to stand up there in some cheap dress, right?" I said, "You can wear whatever I pick, if you want to be in it." She laughed and said, "Babe, I'm not wearing something that makes me look like I'm attending a farm-themed funeral." I said, "Then you don't have to be a bridesmaid." She paused, like she didn't expect me to say it that easily, then said, "I mean, I'll see if I can even come. Mom's been stressed. You know how she gets." I did know. I also knew Kendra loved using Mom's moods as a shield. After that, my family group chat got weird. My aunt posted a thumbs up to my wedding website link and nothing else. My cousin Danny messaged me privately, "I'm excited for you," then immediately followed with, "Don't tell your mom I said that." Like my wedding was some forbidden topic. I kept moving forward anyway. Mason and I tasted cakes. We met with the officiant. We chose music. Every time I did something wedding-related, I caught myself waiting for my family to ask, to show interest, to act like they cared. They didn't, and then, 3 weeks before the wedding, Lacey forwarded me a screenshot she got from Danny. It was a social media post from Kendra. A clean white background, her perfect manicured hand holding a champagne glass. The caption said, "Family trip loading. Can't wait to celebrate Mom's big milestone." Under it was a date range. The exact same weekend as my wedding, same Saturday, same time. I stared at the screen so long my phone dimmed. Mason walked into the kitchen, saw my face and said, "What is it?" I handed him the phone. He read it, then looked up at me and didn't say, "They wouldn't." He just said, "So that's the plan." I set my phone on the counter and rinsed a plate that was already clean, just to keep my hands busy. In my head, that calm switch flipped again. Because suddenly it wasn't just cold comments and excuses. It was a coordinated decision. They weren't busy. They were choosing to be somewhere else on purpose, and the part I couldn't ignore was that they were announcing it publicly like it was normal. Like I was the side event. Like my wedding was optional. I dried my hands, picked my phone back up, and opened my contacts. I scrolled past my mom's name without tapping it. I scrolled past Kendra. I stopped on a name I hadn't called in years. My dad. My thumb hovered there. Mason didn't stop me. He just leaned on the counter and watched, like he already knew that whatever I did next was going to change the whole game. If you've ever been treated like you're easy to dismiss, you know that moment. The moment you realize you can stop asking for a seat at a table that doesn't want you. And you can build your own. I hit call. And while it rang, I looked at Mason and said, real quiet, "I'm not begging them anymore." If you're still listening, stick with me, because the next thing my dad said on that call was the first domino, and by the time my wedding day showed up, my family was the one scrambling in public. Not me. He picked up on the third ring like he'd been holding the phone already. "Tessa?" His voice sounded older, rougher, but it was still him. I didn't do the small talk. I said, "Hi, it's me. I'm getting married in 3 weeks." There was a pause where I could hear air moving, like he'd stepped away from a TV. Then he said, "Wow, okay, congratulations." I waited for the next part, the part where he'd make it about himself, or ask if my mom knew, or say he couldn't make it. Instead he asked, "Are you okay?" I looked at the sink and said, "Yeah. I wanted you to know." Another pause. Then, "Send me the details." I read him the venue, the time, and when I said the date, he exhaled hard. "That weekend," he said. I didn't ask how he knew. He answered anyway. "Your mom invited me on a trip. Said it was for her birthday. Said it was important for the family to be together." I felt my throat tighten, but I kept my voice flat. "Did she mention my wedding?" He let out a short laugh, no humor. Not once. Mason's eyes flicked to mine. I could tell he was trying to stay calm for me. I said, "Are you going?" My dad didn't answer right away. Then he said, "No, I'm not." I blinked, like I'd misheard. "You're not," he said. "If my kid is getting married, I'm not sitting on a beach pretending I don't know." I didn't say thank you. I just said, "Okay." My dad cleared his throat. "Tessa, you sure you want them there?" I didn't answer that either. not out loud. But inside, that switch stayed on. After we hung up, I sat at the kitchen table with my phone face down. Mason pulled out the chair across from me and said, "What now?" I stared at the wood grain like it was a map. "Now," I said, "we stop planning around them." The next day, I changed a few things. Not big, dramatic stuff, quiet stuff. I removed Kendra from the bridal party list on the website. I uninvited my mom from the little getting ready suite because she'd never asked about it anyway. I called the venue and asked if we could move the seating chart board behind the gift table, not at the entrance. I didn't want anyone walking in and immediately seeing empty chairs labeled Mother of the Bride like a billboard. Then I called Danny. She answered in a whisper, like she was hiding in a closet. "Hey," I said, "quick question, that trip Kendra posted about, is it real?" Danny hesitated and then said, "Yeah, it's real." I asked, "Did my mom plan it on purpose?" Danny didn't say yes, but she didn't say no. She just said, "She's been telling everyone it's to celebrate her fresh start." I said, "Fresh start from what?" Danny made a small sound, like she didn't want to be the one to say it. "From your dad. From drama. From you being difficult." I almost laughed, but nothing came out. I said, "Okay, thanks." Before she could hang up, I added, "If you want to come to my wedding, you're welcome. No pressure. But if you do, I won't let anyone treat you weird for it." Danny went quiet. Then, "I want to come," she said. "I just don't know if I'm allowed." That word allowed sat there between us like a brick. I said, "You're an adult," she whispered. "Yeah, I know." And we ended the call. Later that evening, my mom finally texted me. Not about the wedding. She texted, "We need to talk, call me." I waited 2 hours on purpose, not to punish her. Just to prove to myself I didn't have to jump. When I called, she answered like she'd been rehearsing. "So," she said, "about that weekend. I'm doing something special for myself. Your sister planned it." I said, "I saw." She said, "And I don't want you making it into a thing." I stared at the living room wall where Mason had hung her engagement photo, slightly crooked. I said, "You scheduled a family trip on my wedding weekend." My mom's voice got sharper. "It's not your weekend. You picked that date without checking with anyone." I said, "I gave you 2 months' notice." She scoffed. 2 months is not enough for people with real lives, Tessa." I let that sit. Then I asked, "So you're not coming?" She didn't say it directly. She went the long way. "I don't think it's healthy for me to support decisions that are clearly impulsive." I said, "I've been with Mason for 3 years." She replied, "And what exactly has he given you besides a ring you probably paid for?" I heard a faint noise on her end like someone snickering. Kendra was with her, listening. I kept my voice even. "Okay," I said. "I understand." My mom paused like she was waiting for me to fight. When I didn't, she tried a different angle. "I just don't want you humiliating yourself," she said, softer, fake concerned. "And I don't want people asking why your own family didn't show." I said, "That won't be a problem." She said, "What does that mean?" I answered, "It means I'll handle it." Then I said goodnight and hung up before she could dig for more. Mason came in from the garage, wiping grease off his hands, and he read my face. "They're not coming," he said. I nodded. He leaned his hip against the counter. "Do you want me to call them?" I shook my head. "No," I said. "I want them to find out later." I didn't explain what later meant, not even to Mason. Because I wasn't totally sure yet. I just knew I was done being the one who looked desperate. 2 days after that, my dad called me back. "I talked to my wife," he said. He'd remarried a couple years ago. I'd met her once. She was kind, but I'd kept my distance out of habit. He said, "We're coming. And, Tessa, I have something you should know." I didn't move. "What?" He lowered his voice. "Your mom's been telling people you didn't invite anyone, that you're doing a last-minute courthouse thing and you didn't want family there." I stared at the floor so hard I noticed a tiny crack in the tile. "She said that?" "Yeah," he said. "She's been spinning it so if anyone asks, she looks like the victim." I didn't react the way I wanted to. I just said, "Okay." After we got off the phone, I opened my laptop and pulled up my wedding website again. The RSVP list, the email invite history. the texts where I'd sent details. I started taking screenshots, not because I planned to blast them online. I'm not that person. But I've learned that in some families, reality only matters if you can prove it. That night, Lacey came over with takeout and sat cross-legged on my couch. She listened while I told her everything, and she didn't interrupt once. When I finished, she said, "So your mom is basically pre-canceling you." I gave a small nod. Lacey tapped her nails on the container lid. "Okay," she said. "Then we do what we do." I looked at her. "What do we do?" She leaned in. "We control the room." Over the next week, we started building what Lacey called the anti-awkward plan. We made sure Mason's cousin, who's loud and friendly, would be the unofficial greeter at the entrance. We asked the officiant to keep the opening short and warm so there wouldn't be time for people to scan the crowd and whisper. We printed a simple program that didn't list mother of the bride or father of the bride, just families of the couple, clean, neutral. I also called my boss and asked if I could take the Friday before off. She said yes, then asked why I sounded so calm. I told her I'm just focused. That was true, because quietly, another piece was forming. I realized my mom didn't just want to skip my wedding. She wanted me to feel abandoned. She wanted me to walk down that aisle knowing everyone noticed the empty space, and she wanted to tell people it was my fault. So I made one more call, not to my mom, not to Kendra, to my grandma, my mom's mom. She's the one person my mom still tries to impress. Grandma answered, cheerful, like she had no idea there was a storm. "Tessa, honey, how's wedding planning?" I froze. You know about the wedding," Grandma laughed. "Of course I do. I got your invitation. It's on my fridge." My stomach dropped. "So you're coming?" Another laugh, confused. "Well, I thought so. But your mom told me you changed it and you wanted it private now. She said you didn't want anyone traveling." My fingers tightened around the phone. There it was. The lie, said out loud in the sweetest voice possible. I didn't rush. I didn't accuse. I just said, "Grandma, the wedding is still on. Same date, same place. I want you there." Grandma went quiet. "Oh," she said. "Well, that's not what I was told." I said, "I know." Then I added, "I can text you the details again, and if you want, I can arrange a ride." Grandma's voice softened. "Are you okay, baby?" I looked at Mason across the room, his hands full of tools, pretending not to listen. "Yeah," I said, "I will be." Grandma took a breath, like she was making a decision. "Text me," she said. "I'll be there." I thanked her, hung up, and stared at my phone. Because now I understood the real game. My mom wasn't just skipping. She was trying to erase me. And if she could erase my wedding, she could erase me from the family story completely. I opened the group chat and typed one sentence, then deleted it. Typed it again. Deleted it again. I didn't want to fight. I wanted something cleaner, something that would land all at once. Mason walked over and asked, "What are you thinking?" I said, "I'm thinking they're going to show up to that trip believing they've won." He raised his eyebrows. I added, "And I'm thinking we let them." If you're still with me, hit like or subscribe so you don't miss the part where my mom realizes, in front of the one audience she cares about, that she can't rewrite the truth anymore. Because the next week, I did something that looked simple on the surface, but it set the trap perfectly, and there was no graceful way for her to walk out of it. The next morning, I sent my mom one text, just to confirm, "You're not coming to the wedding on the 14th at 3 p.m., right?" No emotion. No begging. No explanation. 3 dots popped up right away, then disappeared, then popped up again. Finally, she replied, "Correct. And I'm not discussing it anymore." I took a screenshot and saved it in a folder I labeled Receipts, like I was filing taxes. Then I sent my grandma the address and told her I'd pick her up myself. After that, I did the simplest thing that would force the truth into daylight. I mailed physical invitations again. Not to my mom. Not to Kendra. To the people my mom actually performs for. Her church friends, 2 of her cousins, a couple family friends who always asked me, at holidays, "When's your big day?" I wrote a short note on each one. "I'd love for you to celebrate with us if you're free." That's it. Normal. Polite. Impossible to twist without sounding crazy. Lacey thought it was risky. Mason just looked at me and said, "You sure?" I said, "They deserve to know I didn't disappear." Over the next few days, my phone started buzzing with messages that felt like tiny lights turning on. "Tessa, I didn't know you were having a wedding. Your mom said it was private. I'm so happy for you, we'll be there." I didn't reply with a rant. I replied with a rant? I replied with hearts? No, I kept it simple. "Thank you, can't wait to see you." Then, 2 nights later, my mom called. Not text. Called. I answered and put it on speaker so Mason could hear without me repeating everything. She started sweet. "Hey honey," she said, like nothing had happened. "So I've been getting some weird calls." I said, "Weird how?" She laughed, tight. "People saying you invited them to something." "Tessa, what are you doing?" I watched Mason's face stay blank, but his eyes sharpened. I said, "I'm getting married. I invited people." My mom's voice dropped. "You went behind my back." I said, "There's no behind your back. It's my wedding." She snapped, "You're trying to make me look bad." I didn't raise my voice. "I didn't mention you at all." Silence. Then she tried to shift. "Well, if you're inviting my friends, you should have asked me first." I said, "You told everyone it was private." Another silence. Then she went for the throat. "You're doing this because you're jealous of your sister." I let out a slow breath through my nose. "No," I said. "I'm doing this because I want the people I care about to know they're welcome." She said, "So now you want an audience." I answered, "I've always wanted my family." The line went quiet again. I could almost hear her recalculating. Then she said, "Fine, I'll come." I didn't answer right away, not to be dramatic, just because I knew it wasn't real. It was damage control. "You said you weren't coming," I said. She replied fast, "Plans changed." I said, "The trip changed?" She hesitated. "We can adjust." I said, "Don't." One word, calm. Mason's head turned slightly toward me. My mom's voice went icy. "Excuse me?" I said. "Don't adjust anything on my account. You made your choice." I made mine. She burst out, "So you're uninviting your own mother?" I said, "I'm accepting your RSVP." Then I hung up. My hands didn't shake. My stomach didn't flip. It just felt clean, like shutting a door that had been slamming in the wind for years. After that, she spiraled quietly. I heard through Danny that my mom was telling people I was confused and stressed, and Mason was controlling. The funny part was, she couldn't pick a story and stick to it, because the more people she talked to, the more invitations they said they'd received. Paper doesn't argue, dates don't change. And I wasn't yelling back, which made her look even worse. The week of the wedding, my dad flew in with his wife, Noreen. They brought a card, a small check, and a calm energy that made my chest feel less tight. Noreen hugged me like she'd known me forever, and said, "I'm proud of you." Not for surviving, not for being strong, just proud, like this was normal and I deserved it. The night before the wedding, I picked up my grandma. She climbed into my car with a little purse and a hat she insisted on wearing even though it was dusk. She patted my hand and said, "Your mother's been making a mess, hasn't she?" I kept my eyes on the road and said, "It's okay." Grandma snorted. "No, it isn't." Then she went quiet and looked out the window. She didn't lecture me. She didn't ask me to forgive. She just showed up. Wedding day came hot and bright. The venue looked exactly like I'd pictured it. String lights, simple flowers, Mason's friends setting up chairs with their sleeves rolled up. Lacey did my hair while I sat still and let the room move around me. No chaos, no screaming relatives, no last-minute drama. Then, 20 minutes before the ceremony, my phone buzzed. Unknown number. I didn't answer. It buzzed again. Then a text came through from my mom. "We're here." I stared at it. Mason's cousin, Javi, poked his head into the suite and said, "Hey, just a heads up, there's a woman outside saying she's the mother of the bride. She's with another woman, tall, blonde. Kendra." Of course. My mom had tried the oldest trick, show up anyway and force me to accept it in front of everyone. I stood up, smoothed my dress, and said, "Okay." Lacey whispered, "Do you want me to handle it?" I said, No, this is mine. I walked out to the entrance area and saw them. My mom in a white blouse that was just a little too bridal. Kendra in a tight dress, scanning the room like she was looking for someone important to impress. My mom plastered on a smile the second she saw me. "There she is," she said loudly, like we were in the middle of a perfect family moment. A couple guests turned their heads. That was what she wanted, a scene where I'd have to play nice. I looked at her and said, "Hi." My mom reached for my arm. "We decided to come support you," she said. I took one small step back, gentle, like I was avoiding smudging makeup. I said, "You texted me you weren't coming." She laughed, too big. "Oh, don't be dramatic." Kendra smirked and said, "Can we not do this right now?" I nodded once. "We won't," I said. Then I turned slightly so they could see the small table by the entrance. On it was the seating board, and right beside it, a framed sign Lacey and I had printed that morning after I made one last decision. It read, "Welcome. Please take a program and find a seat. Today we're celebrating the people who show up with love." Under that, in smaller text, "If you're here to cause stress, there's a coffee shop across the street." It wasn't rude. It wasn't a curse. It was a boundary, in public, with witnesses. My mom's smile froze. She hissed, low, "Is that about me?" I kept my voice normal. "It's about everyone." Then I pointed to the programs. There were no special titles. No mother of the bride row. No front seat with her name. The first row had my grandma, my dad, Noreen, and Mason's parents. All already seated. All visible. All real. My mom looked past me and saw it. She saw my dad. Her eyes flicked like she'd been slapped. Kendra's face tightened. My mom whispered, "You invited him." I said, "He wanted to come." She said, "After everything?" I replied, "This isn't about your everything." People nearby were listening now, pretending not to. My mom's voice rose half an inch. "So where do we sit?" I said. "Anywhere that's open," Kendra scoffed. "Are you kidding me?" I looked at her. No. My mom leaned in, teeth clenched behind her smile. "If you embarrass me in front of these people," I cut in softly, "you already told these people I didn't want them here." That landed, because two of her church friends were walking up right then, smiling at me. One of them, Mrs. Alvarez, waved and said, "Tessa, you look beautiful. We're so glad you invited us, sweetheart." My mom turned her head toward Mrs. Alvarez so fast her earrings swung. Mrs. Alvarez kept smiling, confused, and added, "We were surprised your mom said it was private. Good thing we got your note." My mom's mouth opened, then closed. Kendra looked at my mom like, "Oh, so that's what happened." For the first time, Kendra didn't look smug. She looked cornered. My mom's face stayed frozen in that polite mask, but her eyes were frantic, searching for a way to steer this back. There wasn't one. Because I didn't argue. I didn't cry. I didn't make a speech. I just let the truth exist in the room. My mom grabbed Kendra's wrist and hissed, "We're leaving." Kendra yanked her arm back. "Why? We drove all the way here." My mom said through her smile, "Because she's being cruel." I looked at them and said, "The ceremony starts in 10 minutes. Then I turned and walked away. Behind me, I heard my mom say, louder, "Unbelievable." But nobody followed her. Nobody begged her to stay. Javi opened the door wider for incoming guests, not for her. When I reached the aisle, Mason was waiting. He looked at me like he'd been holding his breath. I gave him a small nod, that's all. The music started. I walked. I saw my grandma's eyes shine, but she didn't wipe them like it was a performance. My dad stood when I reached the front row, not to steal attention, just to show respect. Mason's mom held a tissue. And the empty space where my mom thought her absence would echo, it didn't, because it was filled with people who chose to be there. After the ceremony, during pictures, my mom tried one last move. She came back alone, without Kendra, and hovered at the edge of the lawn. I saw her talking to Noreen with that too sweet face. I walked over, still in my dress, and said, "Can I help you?" My mom said, "I just want a photo. I'm your mother." I said, "Not today." She blinked hard. "You'll regret this." I said, "Maybe." Then I turned to the photographer and said, "Let's get one with Grandma." My mom stood there like she'd been shut down by a wall. And the wild part? She didn't explode. She couldn't. Too many eyes. Too many people who now knew the truth. She left without saying goodbye. Later that night, Danny came up to me by the dessert table and said, quietly, "I'm sorry." I said, "You came. That matters." She nodded like she understood something new. In the weeks after, my mom posted vague quotes online about ungrateful daughters and boundaries being disrespect. But people didn't bite the way she wanted. Mrs. Alvarez commented, "Weddings are about love. Glad Tessa had a beautiful day." My mom deleted it. Kendra stopped calling me babe and just stopped calling. My grandma started inviting me to lunch without my mom, like she was making her own choice for once. And my dad? He kept showing up in small ways. A text, a check-in, no big apologies, just presence. Mason and I hung our wedding photo in our hallway, not the posed one. The candid one where I'm laughing because he whispered something dumb right before the kiss. That picture reminds me of the only lesson I actually needed. The people who love you don't make you audition for it. They show up. And if they don't, you don't have to burn the building down. Sometimes you just turn on the lights and let everyone see who walked out.